Emmanuel Todd is a French sociologist. In his 70s now, he is an avowed man of the left. And he made what I think is one of the most incisive and most French observations about our current political moment, on both sides of the Atlantic, which is sometimes called a populist moment, sometimes a nationalist moment, sometimes both. Here we, I guess, call it a national conservative moment. But it encapsulates the same moment. It encapsulates the same set of ideas to a large extent. And here's what Todd said. He said the opposition between what are called populist movements and movements of so-called elites has long been complicated by a major paradox. The elites express, in elegant and apparently moderate terms, absurd ideas that are characterized in reality by extreme violence. The discourse of globalization is nothing but shit in a silk stocking. Among its propagandists, we find well-bred persons who boast of every imaginable credential, but who say awful things and condemn a significant part of the population to social exclusion. In the opposing camp, we find improbable personalities such as Trump, who certainly utter obscenities that are in fact much more reasonable and moderate in their economic, social, and demographic implications. Frenchman, no less. But why did he use the term shit in a silk stocking? Some of you may recognize the phrase. It's how Napoleon referred to his foreign minister, Talleyrand, and it is a remarkably useful and accurate allusion today when we think about about our global elite. Some people in this room have called the cathedral. Talleyrand was the richest man in France and her chief diplomat, which makes him sound suspiciously like the modern globalist oligarch that we sometimes call Davos man. Talleyrand is notorious because he took bribes from France's enemies while he was negotiating treaties on behalf of Bonaparte. Such treacheries still happen. See, for example, Samir Jain. He was the head of cybersecurity at the National Security Council under the Obama administration. This means that he was working in the West Wing of the White House for the president. It makes him one of the top, if not the top, American official in charge of cybersecurity. So how does Samir Jain earn his daily bread today? This man now works for the Chinese, having taken a position advising Huawei on how to, quote, deal with, or more likely evade, the very security standards that he helped to create. This is wrong. But it is also typical of the global elite who see themselves not as Americans but as free agents, as global citizens seeking their own narrow parochial interests and who are happy to line their pockets regardless of what it does to their country. The spirit of Talleyrand is alive and well. We have plenty of our own shit in a silk stocking. I'll give you another example. Google. As Peter Thiel noted the other night, Google refuses to work with the American military, but engages in what he called a seemingly treasonous collaboration with the Chinese military. Why? Because they don't think that they are American, and they don't feel that they owe any homage or fealty to the American people or to the American nation. So, with that as an introduction of what globalism is and what it does, let me put forth a few propositions. Number one, globalism is an advanced and deviant form of liberalism. Number two, there is a comprehensive ideology that supports what we often refer to as globalism. Three, the globalist ideology is both utopian and dehumanizing. Four, the city-state and the nation-state are better suited to nurturing and sustaining ordered liberty and the good life. Why do I say the city-state? Why do I include that? Because we have successful city-states operating in the world today. See Singapore. There are others. Hong Kong is a pretty good example, but Singapore maybe is the best. So we will include them too. 5, globalism is an impatient, messianic ideology that engages in moral imperialism and is dependent upon violence. Witness our own country's optional wars, but witness also the way social and economic punishments are imposed upon those who question the ideology behind globalism. They are shamed, they are deplatformed, they are ostracized, and they are often made unemployable. Those who question the secular religion are shown no mercy. And that's the best way to understand this deviant form of political ideology that we call globalism as a secular religion that self-consciously seeks to replace revealed religion. James Damone of Google is a well-known example of the shaming, the deplatforming, the dehumanizing, and the rendering unemployable. Number 6. Globalism is a materialist, man-centered ideology that is overtly hostile to biblical religion and the family, which both represent competing power centers and which must therefore be degraded and or destroyed. So having given you those propositions, let me quote the president from the Warsaw speech in 2017. He said, and I reiterate, the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect our borders? Do we have the desire and the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it? Those are all good questions, and the answer, I think, is very much up in the air. But they're worth fighting for. Western civilization itself is at a crossroads across the globe. Whether that civilization be manifested in the Western Hemisphere or the East, in the North or in the South, all of us share a rich heritage that is under attack. This time by a pernicious idea that is as old as human history. It is the idea with which the serpent tempted Eve. It is the idea that man can be his own God. The manifestation of the idea in a political ideology and a related political movement have brought us to this unique moment. We now have a president who is a nationalist and who unapologetically believes in our people. We must now, as a people, reject the idea that nations and people should surrender their sovereignty to supranational and transnational organizations, to powerful but unaccountable bureaucrats like those governing the EU from Brussels, to corporations loyal to themselves but not to their countries or their fellow citizens, see above, Google, and certainly not to the so-called NGOs, like the misleadingly named Open Society Foundation and other foundations associated with people like eBay founder Pierre Omidyar and Tom Steyer. They have other goals. They are powers unto themselves that seek political control, albeit indirectly and often behind the scenes. They seek to exert an unjust and unfair influence by strategic targeting of social and political pressure points. They seek to shut down conservatives and traditionalists, and they are well-financed, as left-wing causes always seem to be. But let me digress for one moment. That seems sort of ominous. There's all this money on the other side. There's all these institutions. Basically every Fortune 500, every Fortune 1000 company. And yet we still have a president here who won. In the United States, Trump was outspent 2-1. He won. In Brazil, President Bolsonaro spent very little on his successful campaign. Less than a mayor would spend in the United States. He won too. And Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini and his Lega Party, I am told, spent less than $1 million in last year's election, and that party is now the largest in Italy. Those examples tell us something. They speak volumes about the strength of powerful ideas when they are married with energetic and charismatic candidates.